Ladies and gents. I see some familiar faces there. It's nice to see some cameras on.
How's it, Wendy?
Hello, Nasrat. So good to see you.
You too. I'm so jealous. You guys are horribly mean.
A couple of us, the part of the 30% Club Network in KZN, went for a walk yesterday, and we had the most amazing walk, and we sent Nasrat pictures so that she was jealous she didn't join us. I'd never done that nature walk before, ever. I've lived in Durban my entire life, and I never even knew that whole nature side existed, ever. It's beautiful.
Wendy, which nature reserve?
So we walk along Umhlanga Promenade, that's our usual. And then if you go straight to the end of Umhlanga Promenade, there's a wooden path, and it just says, to the nature reserve. And that's where we turn around and walk back. So and then we had Tapiso with us, and she was like, well, let's go explore. And it's the most incredible nature walk. You go on this wooden like sort of plank path over like a dam. There's you go under trees. It's incredible.
Isn't that where they've got the mangrove swamps?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, so we all went there when we were at school, and I'm not going to say how long ago that was.
We also wouldn't ask what you did.
Okay, it looks like it's warm in Natal.
It is. It was a lovely day yesterday. The beach was actually full. It was full of people. The parking was full. We actually couldn't even get into Doppio Zero for breakfast because there was a waiting list.
So up in Joburg, we are not eating out. We're not going anywhere. COVID is spreading at the rate of knots. We have 17 people on our estate active. We're a retirement estate, and one of our residents died on Friday, and we've got 3 in ICU.
Oh,
and
wow.
So every day we get a mail saying 2 more today, 2 more. So I've actually asked my helper not to come in on Saturday. I'm going to pay her, but I'm paying her to stay away. Because we're all due to go to Botswana on Wednesday, and I can't put that at risk because this will be the first time we've been out in 2 years. So no. But it is scary, guys. So whatever you do, take care, because Natal are behaving like it doesn't exist, but your numbers are almost as high as ours.
Yeah, I'm not certain. It's maybe because the sun, they're saying that it's probably hitting Gauteng a little bit more because it's a lot colder, whereas the virus and sun doesn't survive.
So you do know that that's a fallacy, Wendy. It's because everyone goes to eat out, and instead of having all the doors open in the fresh air, they're now sitting in confined spaces with no fresh air. So the COVID, it doesn't make it more spreadable, as it were. It's the sheer fact you're sitting in a confined space, yeah. So I've just been fighting with my mum, who's in Kloof, 85-year-old woman who's as stubborn as all hell. And I've told her maid's not coming in. I will pay her. And I've banned her from going to church and playing bridge. Bridge is the worst place. 4 people in close confinements spitting at each other. I can just see it. Yep. No. This is far worse than the first and second rounds.
Yeah.
And by the way, everyone who's had their first vaccination are more at risk.
Really?
Because the immune system actually reduces in the first 3 weeks after the first injection, and you are only protected 2 weeks after the second injection. The other thing is that people seem to think it'll prevent you getting COVID, and it doesn't. The reality is it merely mitigates some of the harsher side effects. So there's a heck of a lot of fake news doing the rounds at the moment. It's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, whether COVID is prevalent or not, we should always take, the precautions that we are taking right now in terms of social distancing. It's, if we do meet out, we're out and about, we still social distance. You're not sitting close to each other, you're not breathing on each other. So, just as a healthy means of operating, for any illnesses. Okay, so it's 9:03. I see we're still filling up quite significantly. So let's just give it a few more minutes before we get going.
Wendy, why is your camera not on?
Oh, I thought it was on. Really?
Yep.
Oh. And now?
No, all we're seeing is your logo.
Have
Oh,
you
really?
not got a cover over your camera?
No, and it's showing on my side. I can see myself. Let me log off and log back in. Maybe that'll make a difference. Can you see me now? No.
No. Are you using two screens, Wendy?
No, it's one laptop.
Probably need to duplicate your screen or something, because it's probably showing your presentation mode and not showing your picture.
But I haven't started to share screen as yet.
Not sure.
That's really strange. Let me try one more time, log out and in. And now still no camera? I have no idea.
Wendy, I can see you.
I can see you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. I have no idea why the camera wasn't on it. Yeah, it was showing. It's very strange. Okay. Okay, let's get started. Okay, good. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, yes, we can, Wendy.
Okay, great. Why is this not? Okay, so you can see the screen in front of you with Luella and Associates up. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so a little bit about conscious leadership, one of my favorite topics, and I will be stopping intermittently during the presentation just to get any feedback or any insight from you. So please make sure that what you do is you jot down any questions you have. I'm going to be covering some really, well, I think really amazing information, and I'm a little bit biased. So jot down any questions you have and I'll stop intermittently, and then you're welcome, please, to ask the questions. I love engagement. So a little bit about us. Well, our vision as a company is to enable and inspire a globe of problem solvers and solution seekers. I'm not going to go into any detail about myself. That's a little bit boring. All that's of interest is that I had a successful career. This was at the peak of my career when I was commercial director for CNBC and Forbes Africa and Santon. And then I had a Hiroshima of a midlife crisis. I took a sabbatical and I did a master's in the behavioral psychology of innovation. And then simultaneously, I was doing a lot of self-innovation, and I became a master practitioner in NLP and an accredited trainer of NLP. And what I realized is that there isn't a difference between how an individual innovates themselves and how you lead for innovation. So they are one and the same. By looking at how do I innovate myself and studying the language of the mind, neuro-linguistic programming, and doing a master's in innovation, I realized that they're actually very similar. So we all know why we need to innovate. There's rapid changes happening all around us at the moment, and the rate of change is only going to increase. There's the debate where that people say, are we in the exponential age? Are we not in the exponential age? Personally, I'm of the opinion that we're not actually in the exponential age yet, because we need technology to reach a certain tipping point, and we haven't reached that tipping point in a lot of technology at the moment. When we do, if we are already battling with change now, it is only going to get exponentially worse as far as the compound impact of change, if you think of Moore's law. So we have Sophia, who's on the left there. I'm sure many of you know who Sophia is. She's a AI robot by Hanson Robotics. She's a citizen of Saudi Arabia. She travels all around the world. She's incredible. If you go into YouTube, you can see loads and loads of videos. She responds. She's got a little sister on the right there, little Sophia, who you can purchase for your children at home. And then we have, they're testing out self-flying helicopters. There's Uber on the left there. There's 3 locations globally where they test them out. We've got a Chinese robot doctor in China who's passed the medical licensing exam. We've got virtual anchors. So there's so much technology happening all around the world. You just need to, look outside, do a little bit of research and see the change that's happening that we haven't yet had to fully embrace. But do we know how to lead for innovation? So leadership is about dealing with change, and more change actually demands more leadership of us. And do we know also what innovation actually is? So this is not a talk on innovation, so I'm not going to go in depth into innovation, but basically at its most basic definition, innovation is the process of conceptualizing an idea into a product or service of value. So you can see there V equals V, and this is what it looks like, is value equals value. So it's an exchange of value. So you've got a giver of value. So a company gives value to a customer who receives that value, and then that receiver then gives value in turn, which is money. So you've got the company that then gives a product or service, the consumer receives it and gives money in turn. So it's an exchange of value. So there are 3 phases in this value creation, and it's called design thinking, which is the process of innovation. So you've got the 3 broad stages are inspiration. Inspiration is actually the most complex stage, and it's actually the most underlooked stage. So there's actually 4 sub-stages to innovation. You first need to be able to connect with your stakeholder, empathize with your stakeholder, interpret what you are actually seeing, feeling, hearing from your stakeholder, what actually specifically is the problem, what actually are their needs, and then define what you believe is the problem before you go into the ideation stage, which is where you go divergent, out the box, And then you go convergent. What is technologically feasible? What is financially viable? So most companies, when they consider innovation, they think innovation is just the ideation stage, which is the divergent and convergent thinking. They spend a lot of resources on this, on focusing on this in terms of creativity, but they neglect the inspiration stage, or secondly, they neglect the implementation stage. And that's when you're actually taking your product or service to market, driving it to market, prototyping it, testing, and doing a reiteration of the same loop. So that's what the process of innovation or value creation is. So again, if a company is failing to innovate, they're most likely failing at the inspiration stage. The inspiration stage also requires a large amount of emotional and social intelligence. And that's where a lot of leaders and a lot of companies are lacking right now, which is also why the inspiration stage is overlooked. So innovation is the empathy to be able to connect with your consumer, where you're actually stepping into their shoes. You're seeing the world through their eyes. What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What are they hearing? That's what empathy is. And empathy can be tactical. It's merely just to be able to see the world through their eyes. It doesn't necessarily mean compassion is where you actually feel for the stakeholder, whereas empathy means you're just seeing through their eyes. So inspiration to solve, creativity beyond your existing paradigms to ideate, and then the courage to be able to implement. So if you just look at those skills that are highlighted there in italics, you can see empathy, inspiration, creativity, courage. So these skills emerge naturally in conscious leaders. So conscious leaders are more effective leaders of innovation. And this is what this age is calling for. This age is calling for innovative leaders who do things differently. So you can see here, when you're wanting a innovation and a continuous improvement culture, you need to look towards your management and see what is the culture of your management. So organizational culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's a famous saying by Peter Drucker, and it couldn't be more true, especially today. So innovative leaders, they create a strong vision. They say, this is where we want to go to. It's not yet realized in the material world. This is where we can see we want to go to. And they rally support and rally excitement, and they get people to move towards that vision. They set the direction, they set boundaries, they promote inclusion, they teach self-excellence, they drive service. They admit mistakes, and it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to admit your mistakes. They lead by example, they empower leadership, they help people deal with fear. There's a lot of fear of change, and that's a natural human response. They have tough conversations. They don't avoid uncomfortable conversations. They promote healthy dialogue, healthy discord, and they see and improve the system. So you need to be able to see what are the effects and what are the causes of those effects. That's what it means to see and improve the system, and they're prepared for a long journey. So I'm going to stop at this slide. So the self-sovereign mind, with its orientation to blame and its black and white distinctions, it's not well suited for a complex or changing world. And that's why that famous saying of Darwin was, it's not the most intelligent that survived, it is the most adaptable. So when we embody the self-transforming mind, we're searching for the next thing that might challenge our deeply held belief system. But it takes a lot of courage to actively seek out something that challenges your belief system. So what does this mean to you? So anybody, what does that last slide mean to you?
Can you put it back again, Wendy?
Sure. The self-sovereign mind, with its orientation to blame and its black and white distinctions, it's the way we're wired, it's not well suited for a complex or changing world. So the more rigid you are, you're not suited for a complex or changing world. When we embody the self-transforming mind, we're actually seeking something that will challenge our deep systems, which is very uncomfortable. So what does this mean? Did anyone want to make any statement on this? Yeah, Nikki.
Hi. So for me, that is, for example, at the moment, I'm busy digitizing my website.
Your audio is very low.
According to me, it's 100%.
Okay, I don't know why it's coming through soft.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, now that I've got the... So I'm busy digitizing my workshops, and I'm a baby boomer. So computers and technologies is something that is very alien, it's very foreign to me, and it's not my comfortable place. But I do know that if I need to step in to where I want to go to, that I have to challenge myself. So I have a mantra every day that goes, without challenge, there is no growth. Have you challenged yourself today? And yeah, there are days when I have to state categorically no, and then I can only try and do better today than I did yesterday. But that is what that means in my current state to me.
Absolutely. And even the fact that you're saying, you know, I'm a baby boomer, therefore I'm challenged with technology, that already is a belief system, right? That you now need to go against to embrace technology.
Pretty much, because it's never been my go-to kind of place.
Yeah, correct.
I'm a paper-driven person. And even now, thank goodness I'm a paper-driven person, because my computer has crashed on occasion, and I have backups in the form of paper. But yeah, it's difficult. But you know what? If I want to take the next step, then I have to face those challenges. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you for sharing. Karen, you also had your hand up?
Hi there, Wendy. So sorry, I'm not going to go on camera, just connectivity issues here on my side. Just very short, if you have got that that view, you limit yourself from a growth mindset. You also limit yourself in terms of growing your own perspective, and you default then into a complete unconscious bias. If you continue to function in that space, because the world is changing. No one person can say that they have mastered everything or every viewpoint. Things become more opinion driven, but your opinion needs to be open to hearing other people's opinions as well. So yeah, that's me.
100%. Thank you. Otto Schwarmer speaks a lot from MIT, speaks a lot of the skill of active listening, which is also the #1 FBI negotiation tool, active listening to other people's opinions. Thank you. Thanks so much, Karen. Anine, were you on mute?
Take myself off mute.
Yes, thank you.
Morning, everyone. And, you know, for me, Wendy, when I looked at your slides, I think when we're talking about innovation and empathy and being flexible, I think with that also comes with that there probably will be some failure. And I think often when we talk about this black and white, and if we're driving for excellence, sometimes failure is almost not an option even. It's not allowed. And so then you have this culture of fear, and that actually stifles, you know, the ability to innovate because of that fear. So I think from a leadership perspective, it's how do you, I guess, drive operational excellence in what you do, but also create space that there is that kind of safety that people can still make mistakes, and that you actually learn from mistakes instead of bringing out a big stick.
Absolutely. Beautifully articulated, Nina. I couldn't agree more. The two biggest barriers to innovation are fear and judgment. So spot on and I mean, it's how do you learn unless you make mistakes? So if you're stifling, if you're creating an environment where people are fearful of making mistakes, they're also not going to be learning otherwise, and they won't have that growth mindset. They're having more of a fixed mindset, looking at just outcomes. You know?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Judy, you raised your hand as well.
Hi, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So thank you. This is a really great start to the morning. My takeout from that statement was really around how does one make a paradigm shift from where one's mindset is currently. So, one could look at the simple example of, well, management doesn't listen to us. They do what they want. They ask us for ideas, but they tend to do what they feel they need to do. And how does one break through that? And how does one change the narrative in terms of a culture of people that has tried endlessly to change mindsets? So, one could say, well, they haven't necessarily had opportunities, but then in that, how do they find those opportunities, and how do they change the thought process within themselves by really, searching within themselves to find a different you? So for me, that's about, how does one change the narrative? How do we change paradigm mindsets and that type of thing? That's my take on that. Thanks so much.
Perfect. And we're going to, in a few more slides, we're going to be starting to touch on that in terms of how do we do that? How do we break free from those paradigms that we have? So spot on, exactly. Thank you. And Tracy, you also raised your hand. Thanks, Judy.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Wendy. Definitely a perfect start to a morning. So happy to be a part of the session. And to your point, when you were chatting on innovation, I think something sparked in that, going into a pandemic also kind of forced people to almost have that self-transforming mind. Technology almost accelerated. The use of technology actually accelerated to such an extent where, you're in the workplace and what you're used to actually had to be changed. Your mindset had to be changed in terms of the way you operate. And, the organization in itself had to embrace that as a culture. Some people are really great at having personal connections and, thriving in a workspace, whereas going into a pandemic actually forced you to sit more behind a laptop or, connect on social media platforms or just, those kind of methods. So I definitely think there's an element of growth there that had to personally take place and professionally. Now you look back a year back and you think to yourself that were you as productive as you were at the being personally at the workplace? But I mean, there's a massive element of self-transforming that took place during that time. And, we had to find creative and innovative ways and means of connecting with one another, of delivering the same outputs. So, I mean, that definitely just sparked something that, we had to become adaptable, to survive, not just the pandemic, but also just to survive in the workplace, to still ensure that, those deadline driven, that environment or performance, it still was key, but we had to kind of adapt to technology in a way that we've never been able to adapt to it before. So yeah, that definitely just, struck a thought process there in terms of sometimes we just don't stop to look at how we're doing things on a daily basis. And we, it's almost evolving over time where, innovation and technology is actually becoming part of what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And, I mentioned briefly that I had a Hiroshima of a midlife crisis. And the reason I think it was such a Hiroshima is because I was so resilient. And we have this, a lot of people bandy around, we need to develop resilience. And I'm of the opinion that, resilience is of value. But if I look at, myself, I was so rigid and stuck in my ways that it took something so big to knock me off, to reevaluate my life, that I'm actually more of a fan of adaptability, which is a very different principle to resilience. It's we're working from home. How do we adapt instead of fighting this change? How do I adapt to this change? And you know what? Working from home might not work. So then how do we adapt to a new form or a new hybrid? It's that continual adaptation of letting go of previous constraints, of previous barriers and comfort zones. Thank you so much for sharing. And Bruno.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I don't know if I'm okay. All right. Thank you very much, Wendy. Bruce here from Botswana.
Oh, sorry, Bruce. I read your surname. Apologies.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's perfect. Mine is just, I'm not going to be very different from those who've already contributed here, but maybe just to touch on the approach that now says, let's be different and start embodying or encompassing all-around thinking. Because often when you look at the way decisions are made and ownership around initiatives within an organization, you'll find that sometimes the answers don't come where you were expecting. And like, for instance, if I give you an example, you find that maybe sales growth initiatives, innovation just might come from a finance person. Business controls initiatives just might come from a salesperson. And it's really around engaging the whole organization to say how best can we drive this vehicle to growth, because at the end of it all, everything is about growth. Yeah. We're looking to ensure that we build sustainable businesses that can be dynamic enough to change over time, considering the changing landscapes. And now we've got COVID, and I was surprised when one of the days I passed by the office, a security guard says to me something that's really amazing, to say, look, I've observed this is what's been happening when the trucks arrive coming from South Africa, coming into Botswana. When these guys park outside, this is what happens. And you look at it, you think for a second, this is not what I expected him to be looking out for. I expected this guy just to swing the gate, open for these guys, check the documentation, but here he is. He's just gone on and made an observation, came up with an initiative that sort of helps everybody around there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for sharing that. And you are spot on. I think our human resources are a company's biggest untapped resource. And part of the work that we do, what I love is you start to realize the ingenuity of people and how much people surprise you. It's somebody that you least expect has got these ideas, but because we never create that environment for them to flourish and to be collaborative and those ideas to come out, we actually don't realize the wealth we have inside companies. We don't need to go outside and employ these traditional consultancies to tell us how to innovate our business. Just ask your people. Yeah. Get them around a round table. Thank you so much, Bruce. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing screen again. So please, again, keep jot down anything that stands out for you, and I'll break and ask questions. Okay. Okay, so this is where we were. Oops. Okay, so 95% of everything that we do is a result of habit. So the way that we think, the way that we speak, the way that we act is a result of habit. It's largely, they say, even up to 97% is unconscious. So we have these heuristics. So even our thought patterns, our belief systems, the way that we believe things should be done, it's actually largely habitual. So we notice only what matches our internal belief system and identified contexts. So the pursuit of innovation isn't merely about nurturing creativity. That's one part of it. Evaluating risk and managing failure with the goal of creating new value. So it's about overcoming individual and organizational fear of the unexpected and discarding what we think we know about a new unfolding world. So if you want a new outcome, you'll have to break the habit of being yourself, how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So change for companies, change is an important theme, and whether it's internal by means of reorganization, changing product groups or working methods, or whether it's external with changing competition, markets or customers, change is always present on the macro, meso, and micro levels of organizations. So change in people takes place within certain boundaries, and this is where it starts to get interesting, well, at least from my perspective, right? So within these frameworks, it is people's values that play a role. So what do they think is important, and what standards do they associate with these values? So Spiral Dynamics focuses on the development of these values from value level 5 capitalism to value level 7 innovative or conscious companies. So what is Spiral Dynamics? So Spiral Dynamics describes awareness development both at a personal and collective level, and it's based on the work of American Professor Emeritus of Psychology, Dr. Claire W. Graves. So Spiral Dynamics describes 8 levels expressed in value systems, each with their own colors, and these levels climb from simple structures to increasing complexity. Okay, so here you can see Spiral Dynamics. So for those of you that don't know, Dr. Don Beck actually traveled to South Africa 63 times at the time of Nelson Mandela's release. He actually worked with Madiba on how does Madiba unite the country after his release and ensure that we didn't break out into civil war. Dr. Don Beck was also featured in the movie Invictus. His theory is incredible. And again, it's built on Dr. Claire Graves' theory, and Dr. Claire Graves' work is built on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what you can see here is they say individuals and they say collectives of individuals, which is a company or a country, we operate at certain value levels. So you've got survival, which is beige, and that looks at obviously basic human needs. We then go into security, which is purple, and that's where we start to, this is more of the magical, mystical theme. So beige would be maybe the Amazon, where it's just survival, it's just basic needs need to be caretaken. We then go into security, which is more, tribal, it's more magic, it's more mystical. We focus on the chief or the clan. It's very, and each of these levels goes from I to we. So I is more, so survival is more I focused, security is more we focused. You then go into the red, and there's no value level that is right or wrong. You've got to operate at the value level that is required of your environment. So if you need to operate at energy and power, which is red, and that is the best suited value level for your environment, that's perfect. So energy and power, that's normally in our urban areas where it's survival of the fittest. So if you come from a war-torn area like a Syria or, one of those regions, then you have to then defend yourself. So then the value level that you adapt to is energy and power, very I-focused, very egocentric focused, very narcissistic. You then evolve into blue, which is the level of law, order, process, structure. So any countries or collectives that are very rigid or black and white and they believe this is the only way, that's normally a value level blue or an order. And what happens is that when you realize that the value level that you operate at is no longer getting you the results that you want from your environment, that's when you move to the next level. So the blue level would have previously been red, and then realize, hold on a second, there's actually a better way to operate. Let's create rules, let's create structures, and let's not all just operate out of energy and power. You then evolve, then people who are going, and again, so if you look at the levels, blue then is we. So it's very much we focused. You then evolve from there into orange. Now, orange is the level of capitalism. So most of the world is actually at level 4 or level 5. The reason there's a lot of polarization happening in the world is because the value levels, they view the world very differently. And because each value level views their perspective as right, they conflict with each other. So orange is the level of success, strive, drive. It's very I-focused, it's very scientific. And they broke away from blue because they realized, you know what, there must be a better way for me to achieve. And they broke away. So, and now what you're seeing happening is that COVID-19 has been a global trauma, and it's actually accelerating the shift from orange into green. And that's why you're seeing there's a lot of awareness right now about, climate change, about community. So we're evolving now into saying, you know what, rather than the strive drive of, utilizing limited, resources are limited and utilizing them, there might be a better way. Can we care for our community? And then you evolve into yellow. So yellow, which is the level of synergy, that's value level 7. This is where natural innovation starts to occur. So when an individual evolves themselves through the value levels and gets to yellow, they naturally start to innovate. And when a company can evolve themselves up through these levels and gets to yellow, they naturally then are able to innovate. So that's when you are inclusive. You let go of judgment. You see systems and you realize how ecosystems are all interconnected. And how if we are all cells in one body, if one cell is diseased, it's going to impact the body. So how do we heal that cell? You start to see those interconnections and you start to focus on creating authentic, sustainable value. Then the 8th level is holistic life support. And the difference between synergy and holistic life support is that the holistic life support is more global. So you're then focusing on the entire globe, whereas synergy is more focused on your area. Okay. So the most common around the world are these levels. So level 3 to 7, there's very little of 8 and there's very little of 2 and 1 if we look at global numbers. So value level 3 started about 10,000 years ago. Again, power gods, egocentric, warlord level. 4 is about 5,000 years ago, it started to emerge. And remember, as I say, once each value level realizes there's actually a better way, the new value level starts to emerge. So 4, truth force, we, righteous us. That's the area of civilizations, law, order. Level 5, again, capitalism. That was about 300 years ago. Strive, drive, I, strategic self, achievement orientated. I must achieve. I must get a promotion. I must get a bonus. I must get a car, a fancy one. Level 6 is community. That started about 150 years ago, and that's about human bond. It's about we, community. It's ecological level. And then 7, which is a level of innovation, that started about 50 years ago, and that's about flex flow. And again, authentic innovation, because you can get capitalist innovation at 5, and you can get authentic innovation, which looks at the entire ecosystem. The two concepts are different. And this is when you are at the level of systems. You see the system. You become naturally inclusive. You naturally let go of your fears, and you're developing that growth mindset of adaptability. So the theory is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see here you've got the value levels on the left-hand side. In the middle there, you've got Maslow's need. So based on a need, you have a value. So if somebody has a need for food, you can't expect them to care about the environment, because they first need to take care of the need for food before they start to evolve to the higher value levels. So these basic needs need to be caretaken in a human and in a collective of humans before that human is able to evolve up to the next levels. So the value level 2, which is your tribe, that's breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, excretion. You then go up to 3, they need security of the body, employment, resources, the family, health, property, so they need safety, whereas the previous level is more physiological. 4, they need belonging, they need friendship, family, intimacy. So, and then in 5, you need achievement, respect by others, esteem outward. In 6, you need self-esteem, confidence, respect of others, so that's esteem inward. So and then 7, you need morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, discovery, acceptance, contribution. So that's self-actualization. And then 8 is truth, spirit, consciousness, being, unconditional love, transcendence. And you can see on the right-hand side that there's a general theme that you would need to evolve to be able to resolve to be able to evolve yourself up. So for 2, you need to be able to understand that there is unconditional love for you. You need to let go of any shame, of feeling unworthy, feeling not good enough. You need to let go of your guilt. You need to let go of your judgment. You need to value yourself. You need to let go of fear. And then to move to 8, you need to let go of materialism. And then what emerges is a conscious individual that is naturally innovative. So these are the behaviors of the value levels. So you can see there the 2, animistic, tribal, magical thinking, animistic, ritualistic, it's the chief, it's the ancestors, the elders, the clan. 3 is egocentric, exploitive, it's impulsive, it's authoritarian, it's no guilt, it's survival of the fittest, it's might makes things right, so that's force, it's might. 4 is absolutist, it's religious, hierarchical, bureaucratic, nationalistic, dogmatic, moralistic, theocratic, loyal, traditional, conformist. So you can start to recognize the behaviors and go, oh, okay, which of these do I fit into? Which resonates with me? Which does our company fit into? Which does our country fit into? Which does our province fit into? So it's just the collective of the behaviors in the environment which determines the value level. So 5, multiplistic, rational, scientific, materialistic, pragmatic, strategic, capitalistic, secular, worldly, focused on personal achievement, competitive. 6 is relativistic, communal, socialistic, progressive, eco-conscious, empathetic, relationship-orientated, context-aware. Then 7 is systemic, integral, post-rational, systems thinking. Systems thinking is critical to innovation. Perspectival. So 7 is the first level that starts to become inclusive. So the levels before then are very polarized, whereas 7 starts to recognize and say, you know what, there's value for all of these levels, and I'm not going to judge somebody for their behavior because that might be the right behavior for their environment. So it's 7 is self-reflective, they're constantly learning, and they find interconnectedness always. And then 8 is more the spiritual, the mystical, the hyper-intuitive, the universal, compassionate. So sorry, the yellow is a bit bright. So the level of 7 is where we want to get to. So that's when we are removing all polarity and we're getting to that 7 point of inclusion. So at this level, it's about systems thinking, realizing that everything is interconnected. Innovation is about solving problems. And you're not able to solve a problem if you're not fully able to understand the environment in which the problem resides. And that's where you develop this ability to be able to see the systems at value level 7. So tolerance is the key word here. People work together in a system in which they make their own decisions. This makes it possible to work on a project basis. So characteristics, communication takes place as needed, and it is important that information gets to the right place and is easily accessible. So think about management information systems. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second. So you can see here, I mean, these are different systems, biological, economic, social, political. So you can see how they're all interconnected. And you only get this perspective of seeing how everything is all interconnected at value level 7. Before then, you're largely judging and dealing with a lot of behavioral constraints, fears, and so forth. So you can see here's a wicked problem, the ecosystem of wicked problems. And you need to be able to understand that all of these wicked problems are actually interconnected. Otherwise, your solution is going to be inherently flawed. So you can see here cause, effect. So when you're looking just at effect, the scene, the events, you're not actually, again, solving the problem. You need to have the consciousness to be able to understand the cause, the unseen underneath that, the mental models, the underlying structures, the pattern and trends. You only get to that point, again, when you let go of judgments, you let go of fear, you start to cultivate empathy, self-worth, belonging, and so forth. Okay. So does anybody recognize any 7s in their environment? Does anybody have any questions? Nikki, you're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry. No questions. It makes complete logical sense to me.
Awesome. Good. I'm glad.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any insights? Anybody recognize themselves at any of those value levels or recognize their company or environment at any of those value levels? Does anybody believe they're at 7?
I think on a personal level, I believe that I'm kind of in the beginning stages of a 7. But obviously it's something that you've got to work through with an end goal in mind.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're just wandering in the wilderness.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nikki. Anine.
Yeah, for me, I think just thinking of the environment that I work in and the employer or the company that I work at, we've gone through some ownership changes, and it's actually quite interesting when we were looking at the different levels now. I could kind of see kind of the legacy company and the new company and the new emerging culture, and you can actually see the differences and why there is this from a culture perspective, because you look at it from your perspective. So if you operate at say that stage 4, then you believe that's the right way and this is the way it should be done, and then somebody else. I think for me it's probably just about having an understanding. So if you could get to a level 7 where you understand that there are different levels and the different reasons why those levels are there as well, and why it's probably necessary in certain environments in order to flourish, why that has come about historically, and not to just have this judgment of, but this is the way we've done it, or this is the way you should be doing it. So for me, I think it's a lot of food for thought, and I'm not sure if the slides are going to be made available because some of the things we went through quite quickly, and I almost want to have some more time to just absorb it, please, Wendy. So if that is possible, would really appreciate that.
Absolute pleasure. So I did mention it to Colin. It was in the event invite that if you go onto our website, there is actually a recording of this. Look, I have modified the slides slightly, but there is a recording of this training, professional recording of the training on our website. And all you need to use is use the code 30% in capital letters. So 30% club, 30% club in capital letters. And the percentage as in just the emblem, not the actual word. And you're on our website and you can go 30% club. There's the video there, so you can watch it again at your leisure, professionally recorded. And then also there's a manual there. And the manual there will have the detail, actually a lot more detail. I actually hid half of the slides because I thought if I show them all, it's just too much information.
Okay.
So a lot more detail there on the value levels, the behaviors, and so forth.
Thanks very much, Wendy. Appreciate that.
Pleasure. Sharon.
Wendy, is it possible for at an organizational level or even a country level to be at, say, level 5? There's change of management, change of leadership, and one finds, if you sit back and look at it, that the new leadership's trying to send you back down to a level 4. Is it possible? And then does this not potentially create conflict?
Yes.
Because what you've said has
Brilliant
been
question.
like a light bulb for me. And so, say, for example, I thought I was at level 5 and or level 6 and I'm trying to get to level 7, but certain organizations, I have labeled them as toxic. And now that I listen to you, I'm wondering if that dynamic wasn't the reason I was labeling them toxic. I'm trying to improve, enhance, and I can tell you there's a lot of fault. So I think I've had this major event like you have. And so I'm doing all the self-reading and trying to improve. But at the same time, I recognize that certain organizations are going backwards. They're not going forwards. Could you just expand on that?
Yeah. Fantastic question, Sharon. And you're absolutely correct, is that we can go forwards or backwards. So we can progress or regress. So, and if people respond in fear, or there's a change of management, because your leadership, your management is your largest influencer of an organization. So if you do get a change in leadership and all of a sudden you go from somebody who was a 5, 6, or 7, and all of a sudden you got a 4, it is going to influence the environment. It is going to cause conflict. And if somebody is, say, like yourself, is open into 7, moving into 7, or in 7, it's going to cause a lot of conflict. And then, well, I suppose the key with the 7 as opposed to the other value levels is the 7 is adaptive. So the 7 then needs to be able to adapt to the environment, influence the environment, or leave the environment. But for anybody below 7, it would cause too much conflict, because each of the levels below 7 are very bordered in their belief system and their worldviews. So it can cause significant conflict between them. If somebody is at a 7, though, they can be regressed down if, say, for example, they've got no money, they lose their job. They don't have any, they don't have any sustenance. They don't have any, so that can, because remember, it's linked to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need all of those needs to be caretaken before you're able to evolve up each of those levels. So if your needs are not caretaken, you can also be pushed back down.
Thanks. That gives me a lot more clarity. It also explains why I have walked out of 2 environments.
Yeah, and that's very brave, very commendable to make that.
I think a lot of other people thought it was incredibly stupid, and financially it's probably has been stupid, but I couldn't see myself surviving in that environment, being forced to go backwards. So I rather took the step to leave, and yeah, at least my view was at least I can sleep at night. But becoming adaptive is a continual work in progress. So I still have to challenge myself every day that I'm not continuing to be inflexible or trying to fit the changing world into my worldview, that, I can step back and look at the bigger picture.
Correct. So the midlife crisis, so what happens when we all of a sudden wake up one day and we're no longer satisfied with our lives, that shift normally happens from value level 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. So when I had my midlife crisis, and I was also trying to study and trying to understand what happened to me, why did I all of a sudden wake up and I just was unhappy with my life? So it's that shift, as I say, from law and order 4 to 5, which is capitalist, or the shift from 5 to 6, which causes the midlife crisis. So if you shifted from 5 to 6, 6 then is very, it's community. It's very empathetic. It's very about consensus. So the challenge, though, is that shifting into 6, which is then also the level of philanthropy, is that we can lose a lot of money because we're just concerned about well-being and consensus of the environment and ourselves, and we can make these polarized decisions. What you're wanting to do is you're wanting to evolve from 6 into 7. When you're shifting into 7, that's when you start to become more adaptive to your environment. And the shift from 6 to 7 is about developing self-worth, self-value, healthy boundaries, and then 7 is about letting go of fear, letting go of judgment. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Patrice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy. Yeah, that works. If you agree, I would like to move briefly from the individual level to the community level and look at us as a nation, because that's where the work of Don Beck started in 1980, 1987, when I first encountered him. I think the value that Don Beck brought there, which is still extremely real today, is to make us realize that we are not homogeneous. We are a very diverse society.
Correct. We're the Rainbow Nation.
Yeah, well, no, if you want to, but it's even deeper than that, because it has actually nothing to do with race.
No, rainbow.
Yes, indeed. No, I understand. And rainbow goes very well with the colors of Don Beck, indeed. But in these days, I quite remember that a large portion of the population was on level 4. Level 4 was the brutal, autocratic, organized, but not very nice society. And the rest of the society was either at 3, more tribal, or at 2, just barely surviving.
Yeah.
And I think what we did, and that was really probably the genius that happened during Mandela years, is that we made a brave attempt to move to level 5, to work together. And what worries me is that we haven't actually moved to the next level. We have more regressed as a society to level 4. And that's quite worrying. And the last thing I would like to say is that Don Beck made it very clear that you can't jump a level. Yes. You can't move from level 3 to level 7. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
You need to work your way through it. And that's the challenge that you have obviously went through during your life, but I think virtually all of us have done that, is that the change is never instantaneous. We can find ways to accelerate it, but we have to go through every step, like climbing some stairs. If you try to go 3 steps at a time, you have a good chance to capsize and fall on your nose. So
100%. Yeah.
Indeed. No, thanks. That's all I wanted to do. I'm glad to see that Don Beck is still around, because he must be about as old as I am by now.
No, he passed away in 2017.
Oh my word, sorry about that. That's quite a pity. But at least his legacy, I'm glad to see the legacy is there.
Yeah.
I haven't actually encountered him for a number of years. I mean, his work. But I still have a first edition of his book there.
Yeah.
And I definitely do recommend all of us to actually probably acquire the book, read the book, study it. There is a lot to learn about how us as a society, as South African, we can actually get back together. So that's absolutely vital.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patrice, for sharing. Yes, there is correct that you can't just skip value levels. It takes about 6 to 18 months, depending on the effort that you're putting into shift to value level. So and also remember, so I had my midlife crisis, and I recognized after doing lots of research and studying, Don Beck, as I say, spiral dynamics for me and Dr. Claire Graves, it's the most complete body of psychological theory out there to explain how change happens in a human and a collective of humans. And once I recognized that I had shifted from 5 to 6, I couldn't just then do the work and shift to 7. I had to go back and close off residual energy in all of the different value levels. So it was actually a lot of work, inner work, that I had to do on myself and then shift up through to 7. And what Patrice was sharing about South Africa was 100% correct, is that Madiba and Don Beckett worked together to create a plan as to how do we evolve South Africa collectively with these different value levels to be one, at one level. And the plan, unfortunately, wasn't effectively implemented. It was focused on creating jobs, because you can't, if people are on value level 2 or 3, to be able to evolve upwards, they need to have safety, security, belonging. They need to have a job. They need to be able to earn revenue. Otherwise, what happens is that you regress a society. So we didn't, unfortunately, implement that plan correctly, which is largely what has compounded our current situation at the moment and impacting us having an inclusive, cohesive society. Thanks so much for sharing, Patrice. Nikki, I don't know if your hand is up from earlier, or if there's something else that you wanted to add before I move on.
No, it was up from earlier.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so values drive all human behavior. What we value is where we put our attention. So look around yourself and go, you know what do I spend my resources on? What do I spend my money on? What do I spend my energy on? What do I spend my time on? So whatever you are spending resources on, time, money, energy, that's what you value. And all of us do that. So there's certain things that where money isn't an issue because you value that, whereas other things, money is an issue, or your time or your energy is an issue. So whereas we've got no issue with the things that we actually value, and that drives our behavior as an individual or a collective. So values are what is important to us, not what we like or dislike. So your meta programs are just how you process the world. So your 4 basic meta programs are your Myers-Briggs: introvert, extrovert, detail, abstract, thinker, feeler, judger, perceiver. So it's how you receive information. And our values are part of our key filters through which we distort, generalize, and delete information. So you can see here that we take in external events and we delete, distort, and generalize based on language, beliefs, values, our meta programs, our attitudes, and that obviously creates an internal representation, our thoughts. We get into a state, we have feelings, and then we have behavior and results. Okay. So our values are normally developed, this is the Macy's developmental period. They're normally developed 0 to 7. So 0 to 7 years old, you are actually largely in a state of hypnosis. So 0 to 7, you are in delta and theta. Your critical faculty is normally developed by around about the age of 9. So 6 to 9, your critical faculty starts to be developed because you need to have programs to be conscious of. So that's why the programs develop first, and then you have a critical faculty or consciousness to be conscious of against, programs. So a lot of the way that we behave is not actually even us, because it's largely from our imprint periods when we have hypnosis. So that's why I think it was Plato who said, give me a boy for the first 7 years of his life and I will show you the man. So and then 7 to 14 is modeling, 14 to 21 is socialization, and 21 to 35 is our business persona. And then normally, again, not always, from 35, that's when your midlife crisis starts to take place. So then sources of values are family, friends, church, religion, school, geography, economics, media, whether your needs are caretaken. So the collective of these values is a value level, and everybody's neurology operates at a value level. And thus every environment operates at a collective of the value levels contained within it. In many cases, trauma triggers the moving off of a value level. Hence, the values shift as we progress in life. So trauma, like as I say, the midlife crisis, that triggers you into a new value level. A trauma like COVID-19 may trigger us up a value level or down, depending on how it impacted us. So if we lost our jobs, we would have been triggered down. If we were able to keep our jobs, we just started to go, hold on a second, what's the purpose to life? You're actually moving up a value level. Okay. So these are the core values and ethics for each value level. So again, your 2 is tribalistic, animistic, the ways of the tribe, animistic beliefs and mystical signs. They serve the clan in ancestral ways. And again, the levels go we are. So that's very we. Then you go to I, which is egocentric, exploitative, laws of the jungle, impulsive drives and immediate results, guiltless service of raw self-interest. Then 4 is absolutist, moralistic, commandments of higher authority, comply with rules, so very bureaucratic, avoid punishment, duty, guilt to do what is right. 5 is multiplistic, rational. This is the level of capitalism. Most companies are at 4, this 4 level, or at 5. So multiplistic and rational, situational rules of the game, individual principles of conscious, autonomy, and self-control to win. It's a very win-win, well, not win-win, it's very win-orientated, very I-focused. So, and then 6, this is where you go more into consensus. So sociocentric, humanistic, relative needs of the collective, fit in with the group's norms and attitudes, best serve the people's common good. So the midlife crisis, as I mentioned earlier, is you shifting from 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. So oftentimes when a CEO all of a sudden becomes a philanthropist, he's shifting from 5 to 6. 6, you can lose a lot of money. 6 is still polarized because you're still judging the value levels below you. So you want to ultimately be able to shift yourself and move into 7. So this is where, again, you become inclusive, you see the system. It's very existential, systemic, integrated processes and flows to align conflicting alternatives. So you're able to adapt. You're able to adapt to a 5, to a 6, a 4, and you appreciate them. And you understand that it's just human evolution, human behavior. They are just reacting to the environment. You let go of that judgment, and it's personal responsibilities and being. So the challenge with 6 is that you're always striving for consensus, and sometimes you don't always get consensus. You need to realize that there is a better way. So where you're also looking at, you're expressing yourself, but you're also looking at how is that impacting the group. So it's more integrated. And then 8 is holistic, experiential, patterns of the whole, sense of collective individualism to serve the entire living system. So again, that's when you're going very global. Okay, so at each of these value levels, this is what happens. So you're going along your existing value levels, you've got the status quo, all of a sudden you have some kind of trauma. So you have, as I say, an event like a COVID-19, or as I say, you have like me, where you just wake up one day and you go, I'm no longer satisfied with my life anymore. So then you have resistance, and then chaos. So it's natural to go into resistance. It's natural to go into chaos. If you are implementing change in your environment as a leader, the first response you're going to have from your staff is resistance and then chaos. You need to have the strength to be able to hold that space so that change actually gets implemented. For me, why it took me so long to transform is that I resisted the change for the longest time, because that's why personally I'm not a big fan of resilience. So I resisted the change and I was like, no, my life is under control. Everything is fine, but everything was chaotic. Everything was chaos. And I was like, no, in complete denial. And then when you eventually surrender, you give up and you say, fine, I'll adapt. I'll transform. That's when you start to go up, and that's when integration happens. And that's when you shift up to the next value level. So this happens every time there's any change, neurological or otherwise. So in order to grow, you must make a change. With change comes an identity crisis. So it is a trauma. So that's really the breaking down or breaking through of old values and old habits. Okay, so it's a loss of self. You're losing the person that you were, you're creating a new identity. It's not trivial work, guys. It really is very deep work. For me, it was a challenge. So the complexity of the thinking must match or exceed the complexity of problems of existence. So right now we're going into an age of complex, wicked problems. So we need people to do the inner work that they need to do, and we need companies to evolve accordingly once the individuals do the inner work, so that we are able to address complex problems. Otherwise, the problems that we're having right now are just going to keep being created, and we're never going to sustainably solve them. So when you transition value levels, you need to let go of being a victim and get understanding. You need to let go of hurt and rejection. You need to get self-acceptance. You need to let go of guilt or unworthiness. You need to get forgiveness. You need to let go of unfulfilled expectations, and you need to get totally going with the flow. You need to let go of control. So control and get peace, faith, trust. You need to let go of rules and duties and get commitment. Let go of social expectations, let go and be a leader. Let go of fear of power and be the power. Let go of fear of sharing power, and there's nothing outside. Let go of limitations, get the infinite in all. Let go of sadness of nothing else out there, and realize that we are all interconnected. There is a oneness out there. So agile leadership and the exponential change, the age that we're in right now, Fear of failure, get curious instead. Fear of losing control, empower instead. Fear of uncertainty, become a visionary. Fear of losing power, instead be collaborative. Fear of conflict, instead be courageous. Okay. So your perspective is everything. You've got to start to see discomfort as a growth opportunity. You have to see problems as challenges to be solved. Rejection as redirection. Triggers that reveal wounds for you. Darkness reveals light. Failures reveal lessons. Fear teaches. There's a typo there. Fear teaches. And pain is power. Okay, so I'm going to stop here before I go on. Any questions?
Hi, I don't have a question, just two observations. And I see you put something on for Dr. John Demartini, who is a guru of mine. For those who are not sure of what their values are, John has on his website a free values determination. It's a set of, I think, 12 or so questions, and it gives you great insight as to who you are essentially as a person. Because if you're not following your values, that's where you often lose sight of who you are intrinsically as a person. And the other one then, of course, is Tony Robbins, who is another guru of mine, and he always says that there will be no change until the pain becomes greater than the pleasure. So when it starts as a tickle in your head, like you resisted it, and until that grew too big for you to handle anymore, there was no change. The minute you realized that it was more painful sitting where you were than it was to change, that's when change starts happening.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. I had to be brought to my knees because I was so resilient to be able to make that change. You're correct. And you don't need to. I think Oprah always speaks about, you hear the whispers and then you feel the wind and then you ignore it and then you get knocked outside the head by a ton of bricks. So after my trauma, I was like, I'll just be adaptive. I don't want to be knocked outside my head ever again. Thank you for sharing, Nikki. Yeah, Tony Robbins is great. DeMartini is great. My personal favorite is Dr. Joe Dispenza. So follow Dr. Joe Dispenza on social media. He's got loads of free videos on YouTube. He is fantastic. He's a neuroscientist, and he was a chiropractor, and he actually got hit over by a car. So he was a cyclist. He got hit over by a car, and he went to 3 different surgeons, and they all said to him that because he had had damaged his spine, they said there was nothing that they could do. He was going to be paralyzed for life. And he made a pact with whatever your belief system is. He made a pact with God, with a higher power. And he said if he can heal his spine through using the power of his mind, through epigenetics, then he will dedicate the rest of his life to teaching other people to tap the potential of their minds. And he healed his spine within 6 weeks. And he went on to do a PhD in neuroscience. So he's incredible one to watch. I see Paula on the chat has also shared wisdomoftrauma.com. So if you look at the chat group, you can also see that. And in terms of your values, what you can also do is, grab a pen and piece of paper and just write down on a piece of paper everything that you value. So in an area of career, so you've got to look at a specific area. So because you have got different values for different areas. So you've got different values for family, for friends, for career, for self-development. So look at a particular area and say, right, so in this area, like in the area of career, what are all the things that I value? And you write down on a piece of paper until you can't write anymore. And then what you do is you summarize those that actually resonate the most with you. So after you've written for, as I say, a full sheet of paper, you summarize about your top 5 or 6. From 6, there's no longer significance. So summarize your top 6, and you can see they're the things that you value. And then what you want to do is give yourself a percentage of satisfaction. So out of 100%, how satisfied are you that you're achieving that value in your life? So whatever the percentage is, 50, 80, 20, give yourself a percentage. And whatever is in the gap, that's the self-work that you need to do. So whatever is in the gap, those fears, those frustrations, those annoyances that are pulling away from 100%, that's the inner work that needs to take place to evolve your value levels. Okay.
Thank you.
So if there are no more questions, and I'm going to continue on the last stretch. Okay, any more questions before I go on the last stretch? Going, okay. Okay, so ultimate consciousness is when you are no longer triggered by these lower level emotions. You can see here at the bottom, this is actually the Hertz frequency. So emotions vibrate at a certain Hertz frequency. So when you're triggered by shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, which is, lack, anger, pride, you actually are, when you're triggered by those, you're actually dropping your frequency and you're actually moving away from ultimate consciousness or awareness. So you're also actually being triggered and going into your limbic system. And when you innovate from the frontal lobe of your neocortex. So you don't actually have all of the resources you need then to be able to think creatively, to be able to problem solve when you are triggered by these emotions. You actually contract, you lose intellect. So you want to be able to let go of all of your triggers and operate in those emotions from 200 hertz up. And obviously, the more that you can be in peace and enlightenment, that's in the highest level of awareness or consciousness that you actually have. So this is Dr. Joe Dispenza. So you can see there that we have energy centers. So we've got 7 energy centers throughout of our body. And you can see there all of the pituitary, pineal, thyroid, etc. on the left-hand side. And then on the right, how energy gets stuck. So this is also linked to evolving value levels or evolving awareness or consciousness for ultimate authentic innovation, is that you need to resolve this energy trapped in your energy centers. So you can see there at the bottom, those are obviously very sexual orientated. You can see there in the middle, you've got guilt, shame, pain, unworthiness, lack, victimization, competition, control, impatience, ego, self-aggrandization. Once you are able to resolve all of that energy through inner work, you are able to move your energy up. When you can move your energy up, you are going more into your frontal lobe, you're more creative, more innovative, you have higher levels of consciousness, you're operating at a value level 7 once you get to that point. Okay. When you go outside of those 7, you can see there's 1 outside the body. That's when you're going into 8. I'm not there yet. I'm still at 7. So how to liberate energy. So layer by layer, when you unmemorize emotions, you liberate energy. So layers of emotions, unmemorizing an emotion, liberating energy. So you can see there unworthiness, anger, fear, shame, self-doubt, guilt. So all of those block innovation. They block your evolution through the value levels. They block your ability to solve complex problems. They block your ability to see systems and to solve these wicked problems. So you want to unmemorize all of those. Okay. That's Joe Dispenza. So what is the outcome? So the outcome is inclusive leaders who are emotionally intelligent. So all of this inner work, what it builds within you is emotional and social intelligence. So 90% of top performers have high EQ. People with high EQ earn $28,000 per annum more. That's World Economic Forum, Dr. Travis Bradbury. So inclusive leaders who create cohesion, because now we're more focused on the ecosystem. So 15% increase in cohesion doubles productivity. So revenue grew 4 times faster. So that's McKinsey and John Cotter. So an innovative business that is free enterprise and pro-profit, but not at the expense of any stakeholders. So they are self-expressive. You as an individual like 7 are self-expressive, but not at the expense of anybody. So you're balancing both. 7 is the first level where you're healthily balancing both. So from capitalism to conscious capitalism or stakeholder capitalism or King 4. So conscious businesses produce higher long-term returns than profit-only businesses. So returns of 10 to 14 times more. So it's good for money. So it's not only that you're going to do the inner work and have peace, it's actually good for a business to have those returns. So teams led by inclusive leaders are higher performing, higher quality decisions, more collaborative, more innovative. That's Harvard Business Review. So the next generation of globalization must be inclusive. That's Jack May. So inclusion starts with self-inclusion. You cannot accept another until you accept yourself and make unconscious habits, thoughts, and feelings conscious. Become aware of them. Was it Young who said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Okay. So, any questions? There's another, so Nikki mentioned DeMartini in terms of the values check. If you want to see what value level you are, Dr. Adriana James has got a value level questionnaire on her website. It's quite a long questionnaire, but if you really want to know what value level are you, then you can do the assessment on Dr. Adriana James's website. Yeah. So there is as I mentioned earlier, there is a recording of this training on our website. So if you go to www.numela.co.za and you go under online courses, you'll see that there's Leaders Chat series, Leaders Chat 1, and you'll see it's Conscious Leadership. You click on that, use the code 30% club in capital letters. There's no charge, and there's the whole video which you can watch again. I go into a little bit more detail in the video, and there's also a manual with the printout of all the information on it.
Sorry, hi. Can you just repeat the website again?
So let me put it up on the screen, so it'll be easier.
So
that's the website.
On your website under online courses, when I click on it, I only see one thing. It says select a course, Business Innovation and NLP Practitioner Training, learn more.
Correct. Go on to that one and you'll see that there's one lesson there called Conscious Leadership.
Aha, thank you.
Do you see that?
I'm getting there.
Okay. It should say
Leader Class 1.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank
you.
you.
What was the password again?
So 30 as in the number 30. So 30 and then percent, the emblem percent, and club in capital letters. And so when you're going to check out, you just use that code 30% club in capital letters, and there's no charge. You can watch the video. It's a professionally recorded, so it's a nice quality, and then you can download the manual that's attached to it. And if you have any questions, because I mean this is my passion, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to drop me an email. So my email is wendy@numela.co.za. So happy to engage in any conversation if you'd like. I find it fun to talk about this stuff, so it's fun for me. So email away. Okay, so did anything stand out for anybody? Any questions or did anything stand out?
I've got a whole lot more work to do. How's that?
That's awesome.
I think we all do, but I think it's the realization that whatever we find, as in Oprah with the whisper and the wind and then a typhoon hits you in the head, we need to listen when we hear the whisper rather than wait until we get knocked upside the head.
Correct. And that's, I mean, I've become very attuned to hearing those whispers, and I do the work immediately. Because, I mean, even though I've done a lot of self-work, we're humans, your journey's never over. It's just listening. And the key is to figure out your triggers. So as soon as something triggers you, that's when you know I've got work to do within this trigger. What do I mean to learn? Supiso.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much. This was really, really very insightful. I think the one thing that really stood out for me was that framework that it was on one of your slides where you were basically showing the different levels, value levels, as well as the behaviors associated with that. And I think for me, it was quite useful to use that framework to try and unpack for myself the organization that I work at, the manager I report to in terms of where I think he's operating and where I as an individual am operating. And I found that when I started thinking about it in that manner, it actually started to make a lot of sense, those areas where I've felt some conflict, in terms of how him and I engage, and also conflict for myself internally when I'm now looking at where I'm wanting to go versus where the organization is going, etc. So that was really very useful. What I also enjoyed, because it resonated so well for me, was when you mentioned how a trauma can sometimes force a person to move down one level, because I know that, for example, when I lost my job or I went through certain trauma incidents, I did move down one level. And for me, what I found I had to do to move back up the level was that I had to really surrender to the process. And I had to acknowledge the fact that for a number of years when I was still in corporate, so much of my self-worth had been tied to my career. So I had to then go back and revisit that and just ask myself why, and so unpack all those beliefs and how I had come to define my own values. So it really has been quite useful. I think if I were to think about one of the areas I'm grappling with now, and it's in a positive way, it's one of saying I don't actually have to operate at a high frequency level all the time, but rather I need to, at every point in time, be aware of where I'm operating, understand how it's making me feel, and then think about whether or not the way I have translated that incident or whatever is actually true, And I find that once I start looking at it that way, I automatically start to move back to higher frequencies. So yeah, it really has been quite an insightful session. Thank you.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad to be so, and I can absolutely resonate. When I exited corporate, it was very traumatic because when career and success defines you, and all of a sudden you're outside of it, it's an existential crisis. Who am I? What am I? What am I if I'm not defined by my job or my career and so forth? And it wasn't an easy journey at all, and it was a long journey. And you also don't seamlessly evolve through value levels. The majority of your energy. So you might be, say, for example, open in value level 6, where you've moved into 6, but you've still got energy open in previous value levels. So you might need to go back and do work at lower value levels. You normally, as I say, when you're in a trauma, you go back to the last fully completed value level. So if somebody's fully completed value level the last time was, say, 3, in a trauma, you go back to 3.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Any other questions? Patrice? My fellow Don Beck fan.
Thank you very much. Because this is a BoardWalk, probably we should talk a little bit about corporate governance.
Please do.
And what I've found quite interesting very interesting as a matter of fact, with what Wendy has told us today, is that what has been said at personal level today can actually be transposed at corporate level, at company level. And I'm sure you are all aware of the fact that over the past few years, 15, 20 years, there has been a huge movement to change the way companies are governed from just make money, whatever the cost, just make the shareholders happy, to create value. And create value over 6 axes: financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social, and natural capital. And you will see that, go back to what Wendy has told us, quite a lot is applicable there. And for the ones of you who are interested, I have several documents that are actually explaining about what modern company governance means and what creating value means. So if you just drop me a note, for instance, on LinkedIn with your email address, I'll be happy to share it with you.
Yeah.
Then you can apply it to your company in addition to applying to yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrice. That's very generous of you. Patrice is otherwise known as the board whisperer, aren't you, Patrice? Yeah. So
yes, that's correct. Sorry.
thank you for that. Any other comments, insights, anything that stood out for anybody? How does this relate to companies? And I mean, Patrice is correct in terms of this move towards creating value again, which was innovation is. And remember, I said there's capitalistic value, which is, or capitalistic innovation, which is at value level 5. Value level 7 value is very different. Value level 7 value is inclusive. It looks at, it's ESG. It looks at the environment, looks at social, it looks at governance, it looks at all of those factors. But there are very few companies who are authentically operating at 7 because there are very few leaders that are authentically operating at 7, because you need such a long inner journey to be able to authentically get up to that level. You need those high levels of emotional and social intelligence. You need to see the system. You need to let go of fear. You need to let go of judgment. You need to be able to be inclusive. So the 7 level is where you start to get that authentic governance starting to take place. If anybody's interested, there's another author that I'd really recommend, and that's Frederick Laloux. Frederick Laloux, his book is Reinventing Organizations. His work runs very parallel to what I've presented today. There's a lot of synergies what I presented. And he's done research into authentically innovative companies. He calls them teal organizations. But there are very few out there, like Patagonia is one of those companies where you're purpose-driven, but not at the cost of any stakeholder. Whereas a lot of capitalist companies are purpose-driven, but at the cost of stakeholders. So a purpose-driven company that's capitalistic and drive, but your staff, your employees are overworked, they don't have well-being because they're tired, they're stressed. That's not authentic innovation. Okay. Any other comments, insights?
Oops.
So, Wendy, you said, how do we reconcile our level with people at other levels?
Hello, Wendy. Yes. I wanted to, for example, my husband and I, we might be different levels, and just what are the advice we'll give in terms of how to cope and thrive, even having different people in teams, it might be in different situations.
Yes, a fantastic question. So remember, people are driven by their values. So how do we reconcile? So Wendy's question again is, how do we reconcile our level with people at other levels? So to be able to get connection with somebody, I need to recognize their value levels and present my argument, my conversation, my discussion through their lens, through their value levels. So it's the law of requisite variety, the most flexible in the system wins. So if you want to influence human behavior, you need to adapt your style to be able to adapt that individual. So recognize their value level, recognize what's important to them, convey what you want to convey, but through their value level. So you are adapting, which also actually gives you more control over the system when you're actually adapting.
Thank you, Wendy.
Pleasure. Sorry, Patrice, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry again. Probably exceeding my allocated time there.
Never.
But I just would like to emphasize my overwhelming agreement with something that Wendy said, is the interaction. And that's also a movement that is worldwide, is that nobody is an island, being an individual or in our case being a corporate. Whatever we do impact something else, and usually quite a lot, actually. And that's to me that's quite an improvement and pushes us indeed towards level 7. If we ever reach that, that's what every company should aim at. And that's the way, one of the big changes that is happening right now is the way corporates report their activity. And one of the documents that I mentioned a few minutes ago is actually the new international integrated report that actually is all hinged around the interaction of the various elements of a business. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Patrice. Thank you. Any other comments, insights, questions, anything that stood out for you? How you have shifted or evolved? Nontabeko, change is indeed the new law of life. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and it's our adaptability. And remember that it's not comfortable for us to naturally adapt because it triggers that we are in an unsafe environment. Okay, so there are no questions. So, what, Sharon?
Wendy, a couple of weeks ago, I attended a business chemistry session that Colleen had organized with Deloitte. And I've bought the book, and it's absolutely fascinating because depending on your actual personality profile. So it explained a heck of a lot of stuff for me. I'm a driver by nature, and I can't change that. So it was quite nice to learn that instead of always being told I'm always wrong. But there was a lot in the book that was so useful about how do you adapt in your conversations so that people with different personality types can actually hear what you're saying. And I just wondered, has any work been done about integrating what you've done here or what you've learned together with the personality profiles to bring to get everything together? Because I guess I'm at that point where I'm also looking at how do you bring it together.
Yeah, look, so I'm also a driver, and I believe that our key is to be adaptable. So whatever we are, we need to have optimum flexibility. And so it's saying what I was saying to Winda earlier is the law of requisite variety, the most flexible wins. So whatever you are, you should also look at how do you balance yourself. If you become too much into the driver's side, it's going to be unhealthy for you. So, but I'm also a driver. So to your question though, is that, so what we do is, design thinking has got 8 different stages. So in each of those 8 stages requires a different type of thinking, a different type of character, a different type of profile. So what we do is we actually assess the individuals. It's a similar assessment to the business mastery, similar but obviously different. And we assess each of the individuals and we see which of the 8 stages is their strength, which is their key strength in those 8 stages. And we teach people to play to their superpower, that what are you good at? If you're a driver, fantastic. What's your superpower? And we teach them to play with others so that everybody is playing to their superpower and you're recognizing and appreciating the value of everybody, because your drivers can also be quite strong. So you start to recognize the value, and that's when you start to get a healthier blend or a healthier mix within an environment. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. The business mastery is based loosely based on the Myers-Briggs, because when I analyzed that the assessments of the pioneer, and I analyzed them, I recognized the synergy between your Myers-Briggs. So if you understand the Myers-Briggs, you can also understand then where your profile is in the. So do you know what your Myers-Briggs code is?
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah. But I know what I am. I'm primary driver, secondary pioneer.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that also lines up with a whole lot of other things I did years ago, in terms of the team, Belbin, and that sort of thing. So it comes out consistently.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gents, the session is booked 9 to 11, but if there are no questions, then we can obviously end off the session earlier, but I'm more than happy to stay on the line if you do have any questions, any engagement, anything that you'd like to know more of. let me know. As I said, you're welcome. And if there's any of the other resources that I've mentioned that you've forgotten about or would like to know, then just you're welcome to drop me an email. Follow me on LinkedIn, drop me a LinkedIn message if you want any more information at all. It's an absolute pleasure for me to engage on any of these topics. So please feel free to mail away.
I'd just like to say thank you very much. It's been a blast.
Oh, good.
So, thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And just a reminder that obviously the GMA that we extended the deadline until the 15th of June for your submission. So if you didn't submit 15th of June, I'm sure we probably could squeeze you in. So please do submit if you want to nominate yourself, if you want to nominate somebody else, nominate a company. And then also the tables are for the GMA Awards, which we're having with obviously COVID protocols in place in all of the regions, Durban, Cape Town and Joburg, is that we've got a 10% off for anybody who wants to book a table before end of June. So please take advantage of that. Okay, Dr. Adriana James, please, so I'm just following your chat. Shlingiwe, were you referring to Frederick Laloux? Reinventing organizations.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, reinventing organizations, and he's got loads of videos, so you can watch the videos online if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
He's got the most, as I say, his research is the most cutting edge in terms of organizations, and again speaks very much to it because it links in. It's all the theories. It's Maslow's. It's Dr. Claire Gray's value levels, spiral dynamics. They all speak to each other. Integral theory.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Absolute pleasure. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gents. It's been awesome to speak with you this morning about one of my favorite topics. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. And again, if there's anything that you'd like to know more of, any resources, then just drop me an email or inbox me and I'll be happy to give you more information. And then obviously, please do watch the video and download the manual. So you're welcome to do that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Wendy. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.